Warning, the Renegade Recruiter is not for the soft, timid, or faint-hearted. If you need permission or seek approval from your mother, spouse, mates in the pub, or anyone else for that matter, this really isn't for you. If any of what you've heard puts you off in the slightest, I advise you not to listen any further. You've been warned. Prepare yourself for the no bullshit, zero fluff. Quick, dirty, and uncensored secrets for any serious recruitment, staffing, and search business owner who wants to earn more money with less work and fewer headaches, without having to kiss ass or bend over backwards to please anyone. He's a relentless and fearless renegade who will stop at nothing to reveal the harsh, unforgiving, and brutal truth about what it really takes to succeed in this business. He's a guy people love to hate and hate to love. It's your host, Terry Edwards. The Renegade Recruiter is unleashed.
Hello. This is Terry Edwards, Renegade Recruiter, and welcome to this week's broadcast. This week we're going to be talking to a client of mine, Paul Verriz. Now, Paul Verriz owns a boutique search firm that specializes in senior financial positions globally. And Paul has over 30 years experience of executive search. Paul's company is also a member of the IRSA, which is the International Retained Search Associates, which is a global organization with 31 offices throughout the US, Canada, EU, China, and Malaysia. Paul himself is a Brit. He was born in London, but he's lived in Canada for the last 40 years. Paul, hello and welcome.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm fantastic, Paul. Thank you very much for asking. How are you?
Fantastic. Thanks for asking.
Good man. Excellent. Paul, before we get started, this little quick favor. Can I ask you if you've got your email on? If you can turn your email on, because I can just hear that beeping in the background.
Oh, yeah. Let me just...
And while you're doing that, Paul, I just gave a brief introduction to your business and a bit about you, but just give us a brief overview of yourself and tell us in your own words a bit about your business yourself, please, Paul. Paul?
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, did you hear that question?
Sorry. Okay.
Can you just tell me a bit about yourself, please, Paul?
Yes, I came to Canada in '76. I used to work in sales and marketing for Gillette UK out on the Great West Road in Brentford. Mm-hmm. I wanted to come to Canada. I put in for a move, and I came here with Gillette Canada, and initially went to Montreal, where the head office was at that particular time, and everybody thought I was French because of my name, Verriez, and in that part of Montreal, they're all French Canadians, and every time I came down for breakfast, Gillette, they would say, "Oh, comment ça va, Monsieur Verriez?" And my comment was, "Excuse me, mate, I don't speak the language," So it really confused them. So it blew their minds at that particular time.
Yeah.
But I left Gillette as I was to be promoted to the Western Canada regional manager. I declined the move because I just got married at the time, and my wife and I flew out to Winnipeg, which they call Winterpeg, by the way, which is minus 40 degrees, and you breathe in and your nose freezes inside. And the guy that actually I was going to be working for was from the UK. I'd worked for him in England, and when we went out for dinner, he made me aware before I accepted the promotion that he was resigning tomorrow to go to a chocolate company called Laura Secord. And it really affected me because in the corporate world, like anywhere, if you turn down a corporate move, basically your career's shelved, as it were.
Yeah.
And in Canada, Winnipeg is not the most desirable place to live. And if you go out there, you want to go out there with equipment, you're going to come back to corporate within 2 years.
Yeah.
That really didn't happen. So end of the day, I declined the move. And it was hard for me at the time because I really enjoyed Gillette. I had a company car, great bonus, and security and good career, and but it just didn't make sense at that particular time. So I went to a recruiter. Okay, I went to a contingency recruiter and got a job in industrial sales for a company called Becton Dickinson, which is a worldwide medical company. Really liked the job, but the guy I worked for, I really didn't like at all. And I get on with 99.9% of people, but he was a micromanager, which really didn't work well for me. So after about a year, I went back to the recruiter and said, you put me in there, you've got to get me out of here. And he said, well, I can't. He said, I put you in there. So he said, but what I can do, I can find your replacement if you want to come and work for me. And if you can imagine, that was 1980. We were thinking of having kids, and I left again a stable job with a salary, company car, bonus plan, benefit plan, and this guy wanted me to come in. He was a sole practitioner at a franchise called Dunhill Consultants, and wanted me to come in with him and go commission only. And it was tough. And I had a very good friend in the UK, which you spoke to, Terry, called Roger Nichols, and he had been out with a recruiting firm called Duxbury Hyde in London, and said, go for it. So anyway, after talking to Roger, I made the move. And thinking back, it was quite a gutsy move because, I was married and had all the securities of the job to go into commission only. But and my first assignment was for a chartered accountant. And I knew nothing about accounting. All I knew is that they didn't present themselves very well, and I was good at preparing them for that. So that was really how I got into to search.
Right. And I've got to say, it's very brave of you, Paul. Commission only in your first ever recruitment or search role is a very courageous step. I've got to say, well done you. Yeah,
it was. Looking back, at my stage of my life now, I wouldn't do it, but it was good. I mean, I've never regretted it. I wouldn't have got a lot of things I've got now, but it was a good job. It was a contingency firm, again, franchise. He used to come in, who ended up being a very good friend, actually, my boss, used to come in, put his feet up on the table, read the newspaper, and I'd be bashing the phones, and I thought, wow, this is really good. But you know what? It came a natural to me. And at that time, there were 22 offices in Canada, and there were 200 in the United States. Within the first 12 months, I was a top Canadian, and I thought, well, God, everybody's stupid, or I'm really good at what I do. And because I didn't think I was anything special, but at that time, to bill $100,000 in a year was a big deal. And, I billed 150 in my first year. So I was a top Canadian. And then on the second and third year, I became in the top 10 out of the 200 in the States, which was what they called the round table. We used to go to various locations, Miami, to sit down around a table with 10 equals, I guess, and have brainstorming sessions, which was really, really good.
Yeah.
But as time moved on, the owner decided that he really didn't enjoy the business that much and left me to run it, which was fine. I became the operations manager. I hired, fired, and did everything with the company. We had about eight recruiters. But the problem is, it was almost like driving a car, but I didn't have a steering wheel. I really wanted to get out of contingency, and I hated contingency. I was very good at it, and the reason I hated it is because I just didn't feel you could build long-term business relationships with clients. If you can imagine, I had a bunch of job orders on my right-hand side, a bunch of candidates on my left-hand side. If nothing matched in 24 hours, you'd dump it and get on the next one, and I was good at it, but I just couldn't see a big future in it. So I wanted to take the company into the search, and he didn't want to. So I quit. Again, another gutsy move, because we had 2 kids at that time. And again, I talked to my buddy in the UK, and he'd done the same thing and gone on his own. And basically the rest has been history. I mean, at that time, Bill Carswell was his name. Him and I had a real falling out because I was his main man, right? So, but time heals. 2 years later, we became, and we're still best of friends. But it was just, I was his ticket, I guess. I paid his mortgage off.
Yeah.
And the rest is history. So, and I stayed in the accounting and finance field. So.
Yeah, and again, not blowing smoke at me, but again, very brave to say, look, this is what you want to do, and actually knowing what you want. And we speak to contingency recruiters every day of the week, as you can imagine, Paul. And here's an interesting number for you. The average contingency recruiter will fill between 20 to 30% of the job orders that they get. Now, that means that 70% of the time they're working, they're never going to get paid. Now, in anybody's eyes, that's not a good idea. And as you well know, Paul, we've known each other for a long time. We do recommend that if you're doing contingency, that you do ask ask all your clients for a retainer. Because if that relationship's there, they're going to pay a retainer. Now, honestly, a lot of clients won't pay a retainer. But what it means is that you work less and earn more, because less clients will pay a retainer. Of that, there's no doubt. But the fill rates on retainers is about, the industry average, by the way, is 94%. So now you're getting paid 94% of the time, as opposed to 20 to 30% of the time. So well done you for making that decision. Excellent. I've got to ask you, Paul, you've been in Canada for 40 years. Your accent, there is no disputing that you're a Brit. How have you managed that?
Talk sport.
Look, for those that don't know, tell us what talk sport is, Paul.
Well, no, talk sport. I mean, that's just one of them. I mean, you know, I don't know. You have to work at it, that's for sure. But I mean, I talk to my mates in the UK, you know, very frequently. There was a couple of guys in the IRSA group that are from the UK, and but I think, you know, when you're listening to, I mean, I watch all the football games, right? You know, and I obviously, you know, support the best team out, which is Manchester United.
Yeah. We both know that, Paul. Yeah,
have done since I've been a little kid, and but no, and I mean seriously, talk sport. I listened to that for years, and now it's easier to listen to because I can get it on my phone, you know, with the app, and so I listen to it in the mornings. Like I listen to, if I'm listening to it at 7 o'clock in the morning when I'm driving back from the gym, it's usually the lunchtime show, which is pretty good, you know. So so you just have to work at it. That's all.
Yeah. See, you work at that English accent, and it's up to say. I wouldn't know that you've been in Canada for 40 years, rather, because your accent is as strong as ever.
Well, you know what? When I do go back to the UK, they think I sound Canadian sometimes. So.
Do they really? Wow. Wow.
I just have to keep on saying privacy instead of privacy.
Paul, I mean, I've known you for some time now, Paul, for what, 18 months or so, but tell us something that not many people know about you.
Well, I've got 2 boys. I've got 2 sons. In fact, my eldest son was 34 yesterday. He's a chartered accountant, and he's got a business degree from Ivy, which Ivy, a lot of people know the Ivy School of Business in the UK, but it's equivalent to the American Harvard. Mm-hmm. That's a business degree from there. I have another son that's 32, that's in sales and marketing with a company that sells digital education called Nelson Canada. I think they have operation in the UK. So, and I've been married for 37 years, I guess, to the same wife, which is incredible.
Well, yeah.
I'm a dog lover. I have a golden retriever. We've had 7 golden retrievers in the last 35 years. And I used to do a lot of hunting when I was in the UK. I used to shoot pheasants and wood pigeons and rabbits. And when I came to Canada, obviously, I continued that and had my own dogs and ran field trials, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. I love cars. I don't just use a car for the sake of use a car. I just like a nice car and lease all my cars and turn them over every 2 years. But you know, I live in London, Ontario, which is where the British beat the Americans in the War of 1812. It's a town of about 450,000 people, and it has a River Thames, has a Piccadilly, has Oxford Street. It's all basically 53% of the population of British origin.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a beautiful town, actually, London, and it's smack in the middle between Toronto and Detroit in the United States. It's on a peninsula, and if you go down from London to what we call a place called Amherstburg, where they did beat the Americans completely there, that's on the same latitude as Northern California. So people think of Canada as being a cold country. I mean, I'm looking out the window now, and yeah, we have 2 or 3 inches of snow, but generally speaking, it's a beautiful place to live.
Excellent, excellent. And going back to the industry, Paul, you've been in the industry for 40 years, so you're human. You've made some mistakes. I'm curious, what's the biggest mistakes that you've made in the business, either recently and in the past, and how did you overcome them? So the first question is, what were the biggest mistakes you've ever made whilst being in the search industry?
Well, I made a lot of mistakes over the years, and you learn from them. But I have to be honest with you, the biggest mistake I ever made was about 4 weeks ago. And I think you're aware of this. I have a number of clients in the United States, and I can be in the States in an hour. Okay, so we're that close to the border. But I have a client in Detroit, and I went down to go across the border to interview some people about just a week before Christmas, and got stopped at the border. And they asked me what I was doing, and I said, I'm going to interview. And they said, Americans? I said, yes. And they said, are you working for an American company? I said, yes. They said, you can't do that. And we have an agreement, like a free trade agreement with the United States, Canada, and Mexico. And I thought it was covered under that. And normally when I go across the border, I just say I'm having a meeting. I use the words, interview, candidate, and work. And those 3 words were a real red flag. So they just didn't let me through. I mean, it's related to work, because what I had to do, I had to really come back to the office very, very quickly. I had 6 people to interview. Luckily, Skype was available, and I did that. But you know what? My client has been outstanding. They've had to put together complete management consulting contracts, because I guess NAFTA, the agreement we have, personnel or executive search does not come under that. We have to go.
Oh, I see.
We have to go in as a management consultant. And let's face it, in most retained firms, we are management consultants. We don't just go out and find somebody. We usually have to help them with position descriptions, onboarding and everything else. So, the mistake I made was being too honest, I guess. But as far as generally in the business, I think the biggest mistake that I've made is relying on a line of credit when things were good. In our business, and as you know and I know and everybody knows, that in this business, like any business, things can go south pretty quickly. In the financial crisis, that was a big mistake I made. I was, I spent as opposed to invested, I guess.
Yeah.
But you are what you are, and you. I think you have to just be honest and. I know you talk about this all the time, but you have to make sure you implement things. If you start on something, you do it, and so forth. So
you're listening to the Renegade Recruiter Unleashed podcast. For show notes, additional resources, and podcast updates, head over to www.therenegaderecruiter.com.
So that was relying on the line of credit. You say was a big mistake. What have you learned from that?
Well, this year, I've learned that to not spend it as soon as I get it. I mean, I used to like spending money as soon as I got it. Now I have money in the bank, which I haven't had for years. I mean, it's not that we've never made money. I mean, we've always made money, but we've always started the year at a deficit because we've always used the line of credit. I mean, we had a huge credit, and I mean, we've had great banks, but so what I did this year, I mean, what's changed really for me is my age, right? I'm going to be working for probably full time another 5 years. I plan to always work at least one day a week. My son is coming into the business this year, and hopefully is my exit strategy. But that's what changed, because before, when you're younger, you could always say to yourself, "Oh, geez, don't worry about it. I've got another 20 years to work. I can always get out of the hole." Well, all of a sudden, time catches up with you, and you start saying to yourself, "Well, I've got 5 years. I want to make sure I've got enough in my nest egg," right? So it makes you thinking change a lot.
Yeah.
It puts your priorities, I guess.
Yeah.
This business, like every business, has changed drastically with social media, and in fact, when you think about it, it's so much easier to do business today than what it was even 5 or 10 years ago. Really,
That's
when
right,
you think about it, people getting into the business these days really don't realize how easy it is compared with, I mean, yeah, you've got a lot more competition, but I mean, you send an invoice, it gets there today. I used to send an invoice, it took a week to get there, a month process. I mean, so there are things that are far easier today than they were years ago. But I think if I had to say the biggest thing I've learned is that, you know, when you know that you're on the back nine, as it were, of your life, in golf terms, that you've got to prioritize that much more effectively.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess what you've learned there is that when you're generating this good income, that you always put something aside.
Yeah, I always like a cushion, and you know, I'm a great one for reading investment books like Warren Buffett and so forth, and you know, I think I've invested the company's money and personally a lot wiser than I've done in previous years. But I think if there's one thing I've learned is to, you know, in this business, is to do my homework better. Never assume anything. Even after 30 years plus in the business, you're always learning new things. And I talk to some people that just shut it out and they say they know everything, and it's not the case. You know, I'm still learning, and I enjoyed it. That's why I enjoy the business.
Yeah, yeah, excellent. And what unfinished business do you have, Paul?
You mean as far as searches on the go?
No, just what things that you've learned, you know, and things that you just think, do you know what, I probably haven't seen that to the end.
Trying to implement everything you tell me to implement. You know, and you laugh, but it is. I mean, I'm the type of guy, I'm a little bit like an elephant. I mean, when I say I don't think quickly, I do, but once the penny's dropped, you know, I remember it forever. It's just, it takes time sometimes for the penny to drop. And I think the hardest thing I found in working with you initially was trying to, you know, I tried to implement everything all at once, and it doesn't work. You have to sort of face things in and really understand it and do it well, as opposed to try and stab at it. And it's really starting to, you know, to move now. You know, we in fact, we're actually getting our email set up that I do send out stuff every week. Before that, we've been doing a newsletter every quarter, which I don't think is enough. And it's just really understanding that we've got to be out there to everybody. And when I look at some of my friends who have businesses, one of them has a business in the retail side, which is he's got a store that sells all high-end clothes. I mean, like Hugo Boss. I mean, it's a beautiful store, and he emails out to everybody on a weekly or daily basis, and he's having a record year where most companies in the retail trade are having a poor year, and he's the most expensive. You go in there and you pay like $300 for a belt, you know, whereas all the other companies are having problems. So one of the things I've learned, I think, by working with you specifically, is that no matter how bad the economy is, people always spend money, but you've got to work with the right people.
Yeah.
Like I'm working with a client right now, the one that I was going to see in Detroit, and you know, they are a public company on the NASDAQ. They have no debt. They have $200 million cash, and they're growing like crazy. And they're in the automotive industry, and some of the companies are having a tough time, you know. So these are the types of companies that we really try to target now. And I think you and I talked about this. The what was that? I forget the name of the, you know, where the companies are recognized. They're doing very well, but they're under the radar, you know.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things we talk about there is, compiling the list of the dream clients that you'd love to work with, and targeting those clients and clients such as that. There's an old saying that, police arrest a bank robber, and they say to him, why do you rob banks? And his response is, because that's where the money is. And you as an owner of a search firm, it's your responsibility to be targeting those organizations that can afford to use your services and have a need for your services. And they're the ones you should be targeting, rather than those that are going to quibble over the odd percent here and there. So, you're absolutely right on that, Paul.
But you know what? Prior to getting in with you guys, I mean, this is where you're so in tune with it, because if you've been in the business as long as I have and you're still not doing the right things, then it makes you wonder, really. I mean, I used to spend so much time sitting down with the wrong people, and sometimes you don't know it. I mean, you don't know, how good companies are sometimes until you really do your homework. You can't be everything to everybody. You always got to try and, if they're making money, they usually don't quibble on fees, and it's identifying that and spending the time in the right areas of your business. Because in this business, like any business, probably this business specifically, is that you can run around in circles by talking to the wrong people.
Yeah. And again, you and I have talked about, you've got to be prepared to say no to some clients, potential clients, and be happy and comfortable walking away.
Yeah.
Because the moment you can take that position, it strengthens your negotiation situation. You don't have to say yes to every client that you talk to, and the client says, well, if you don't do it at this fee, then we're not going to give you the business. You say, well, that's fine. This is what we do. We offer a good service, exceptionally good service, but you can't have good and cheap at the same time. So if you want cheap, you can't have good.
Do you know, I used that yesterday. I had a client that I've done business with before for a long time ago, and they rang me and he asked me what our fees were, and I told him. He said, is that negotiable? I said, no. And whereas before I may have said, well, yeah, maybe, I think if you're decisive in what you're saying, you believe in, then you got to be prepared to walk away. I never was prepared to walk away before.
Yeah. I think you may remember I did an email on this, when we talked about this, and if you talk to your partner when you first started dating, and if your partner said to you, do you know, I never ever said no to a date? You go, what, never? Oh, no, I say yes to everybody. It's kind of disconcerting at some level, isn't it? You've got to say no to somebody sometime. You can't be all things to all people. And your business is exactly the same.
Yes, exactly.
All things to all people. As I said, Paul, we've been working together, I think it's about 18 months. For you, what would you say has been the biggest breakthrough moment for you over the last 18 months or so?
The biggest breakthrough in the last 18 months? You're going to get a big head if I tell you that.
I can cope, Paul.
I honestly do believe the breakthrough for me has been working with you, and I really do, because it's I felt, even though I've been in business all these years, I felt like I didn't have a roadmap in front of me and I was spinning my wheels. And whether that's right or wrong, I don't know, but I just didn't feel good about the industry. I didn't feel good about where I was going. But you really sort of pointed me in the right direction. I mean, it's up to the individual, to make sure you capitalize on that. But that has been, I mean, that's been, I've learned a lot more in the last 18 months than I've ever learned in the previous 30 odd years, to be honest with you.
Thanks for that, Paul. Is there anything in particular that you've learned that you'd like to share? Well,
I think it's being planned. I mean, you can be planned, but the thing is, if you see, before, when we used to do objectives and targets and so forth, we could never sort of say, well, yeah, we're going to do X number of $1,000, this first quarter. This is what we hope to do that. But now, it comes back to a little bit of the contingency mentality that when I used to work for Dunhill, I'd make, I had to send 25 people out for a first interview to get sort of 4 returns, second interviews, and then 1 placement, right?
Uh-huh.
So I never really thought about the numbers game in retain search, but it's true. You have to. You always talk about, if you plan it, if you set out a plan and you can't measure it, then it's not going to work. And I think what we've done is actually measured what we can do. And what I mean by that is that, I think you and I discussed this a few months ago, that I wanted to get this, and this for this month. And you said, well, you really threw it back to me and said, how many calls do you think you're going to have to make, as far as 10 before 10 or a 3-step process, or at least identifying a new LinkedIn people. Once you start pushing up the numbers, it does come. And it's sometimes hard to to understand that, but it does work.
Yeah, that's a really good point then. And for many search firms and recruitment business owners out there, if you were to say to them, especially perm guys, what are you going to do over the next quarter? What they will respond with is, well, we kind of hope we're going to do this. And that's a very dangerous territory to be in when you talk about hope. Whereas with a process and a system in place where you can go, actually, here's what we know. We know that we can generate 100 leads over the next 4 weeks. We know those 100 leads that we generate, that we'll convert. Let's be conservative and say our conversion rate is only 5%. So we convert 5 of those. Now, our average placement fee is 25,000. Our average retained, let's say, is 7,000. So what we know is over the next month we'll do 35,000 on first stage fees. We'll do 35,000 the following month on retainers. Now that's once you've got a system and the process in place. You're absolutely right, Paul. You can do that. But for many, and you weren't alone, Paul, when you say that you kind of lost your way. Because for many recruitment and search firm owners, they have absolutely no idea. They've got no plan. It is all hope. And one of the things that we encourage you to do is set up a system and the process so you can generate leads when you want to. And it then, of course, makes your business scalable and your income predictable. You're absolutely right. And on that, so just moving on from there, Paul, if you could give one piece of advice to somebody, a business owner, what would that be? Because, I mean, you've been around for 40 years now and you've seen every side of the industry, so to speak. So what's the one piece of advice that you would give to a current search firm owner?
Boy, that's a real loaded question. I think it just comes back to you as the individual. Nobody's going to give you free handouts. You got to work smart, but you got to, if you're going to do something like my son was trying to get recruited by a lot of recruiters, and they would phone up and say they'd phone back the next day, never did. They would say they would do this, they never did. I think one of the key things is getting respected and doing a quality job. And if you're going to get back to somebody, whether it's a client or a candidate, you do it. But it's no good making a plan if you don't at least, even if you implement 50% of it, you could always continue the next 50% the next day. But I get so many people. I mean, when I was with Dunhill, I used to hire people, and they would spend an hour, doing their daily plan, and yet they wouldn't implement 25% of it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, I think, in this business tend to stare at the phone when they go into it. They're scared of rejection, and you can't be like that. One of the biggest things I think is that when and hey, I've been in this business a long time, and I lost a lot of confidence at certain times. It's no different than a footballer or a boxer. Anything in life, if you lack confidence, you're not going to do well.
Yeah.
In this business, you lack confidence. You telegraph it to the clients and the candidates, and if they don't feel that you're confident in what you're doing, you're not going to get any business.
Yeah, that's very true, Paul. And I actually believe that your clients and your candidates can smell that fear and that lack of confidence, probably from 50 paces.
But it's hard sometimes to get out of that rut,
Yeah.
And I mean, we all go through it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and quite frankly, if anybody that says they don't, they're probably not being honest with you. I think you're absolutely right. We all have those moments of self-doubt, and as a search, you know as well, everybody. If you go on a bad run as well, if you go a couple of weeks or a month or so, and you don't pick up an assignment, you're starting to ask yourself questions, aren't you?
Yeah. Oh yeah, most definitely.
Yeah. So I'm curious, kind of, what would you say to somebody who's going through that right now, who's going, no, it's been a couple of months and I haven't won anything. What piece of advice would you give to somebody in that situation right now, Paul?
Well, I think you have to look at what you've been doing and dissect it, and see how you can improve on that. Because as I said many times, you could spend a lot of time spinning the wheels in this business, and once you start doing that, you can just keep on going down. So it's just And the hardest thing I found was talking to the people that were in the business, because what they, like a lot of the guys in IRSA that I work with, even when I was going through a bad spell, they were all doing very, very well. And I couldn't figure it out, and they all said to me, I don't know how come you're not doing business, Paul. And it's a lonely world sometimes, And,
yeah.
I find that, I'm not a sole practitioner. I do have staff, but I'm basically the rainmaker. I'm the person that meets most of the candidates. I think if you're in a company where you have more than one producer, you have a lot more opportunity to create a lot more awareness. But I think with the email campaigns that we're sending out now, you've got to be in their face every day.
You're listening to the Renegade Recruiter Unleashed podcast. For show notes, additional resources, and podcast updates, head over to www.therenegaderecruiter.com.
Thanks, Paul. So if you met somebody and they were about to enter the industry for the first time, what piece of advice would you give them?
Well, I'm going through it with my son, right? Because I have no idea if he's going to be successful in this business. He's totally different than me. I'm far more outgoing than he is. But I think a lot of people tend to think this is an easy industry. Well, I did. I thought it was an easy industry. But you know what? This is probably one of the hardest industries to be successful in. And again, I struggle with how to sort of provide advice, really from that perspective, because it's such an individual thing, right? You've just got to make sure that I think if there's one piece of advice I'd give some is you've got to make sure you're talking to the decision maker when you're looking at marketing, because if you're not, you can spend hours, even face-to-face meetings or even an email meeting, to the person that has no authority, so right off the bat, you need to qualify that. Do you have hiring authority? I mean, it's a sensitive issue, right? Because you could be undermining the person you're talking to, but really, you can waste a lot of time, and efforts in that way. I'm a great believer on that, and I still go through that now. I mean, I think I'm talking to the decision maker, and I'm not, But,
yeah.
But that is because you know that if it's no good doing a straw hat and cane routine, that's what we call it, a big presentation, if the person has not the authority.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to use that person to get to the person with authority, but it's no good spending an hour or two of your time if they cannot give you the green light.
That's right. And a question worth asking there, so as to undermine them, is something along the lines of, I'm curious, Mr. Client, what is the decision-making process that your business goes through before you come to decisions to which search firm to use? And just get them to verbalize the process the business will go through. Because at that stage, they will mention the other decision makers in the business. So the CEO is more like to say, well, you send me the details and I will make a decision. Whereas perhaps HR may say, I'm going to speak to the CEO, I'm also going to speak to the line manager. And at the end of the day, it's the CEO that makes the final decision. But it's understanding that decision-making process. You're absolutely right there, Paul. Absolutely right. And something you said earlier about giving it all in terms of advice to anybody in the business. Here's what we found: our clients that play at what we call 100%. So they kind of give everything. You talked earlier, Paul, about having that slump, and I know from personal experience when I went through a slump as a search consultant, because things weren't working out for me, I was then reluctant to do what I needed to do to get the business. So if somebody said to me, Terry, were you playing at 100% when things weren't going so well? Honestly, I wasn't. And I was kind of frightened. There was this element of fear, well, I'm kind of scared of doing this and whatever. But here's what we found is those guys that play at 100%, who give 100%, tend to get that back. And it's a bit like anything in life, be it a relationship. you enter a relationship and kind of play at it, and give 50%. You enter into, think about your health and fitness, and you kind of play at that. If whatever you want out, you've got to put in. So you've really, what I'd add to that, Paul, is you've got to, from experience, bitter experience at that, it is playing at 100% when you have those slumps. Because often you don't. You stop playing 100% because you're going through that slump, and it's a kind of chicken and egg situation.
Well, it's true. It is true. But I think, I've gone through, in Canada anyway, I've gone through probably 6 recessions. And the funny thing about it is, again, I think I've discussed this with you previously, that I started in this business in 1980. In 1981, I forget what it was like in the UK, but in Canada and North America, there was a huge recession. And I started, a year after the recession started, but I didn't know any different. I just went ahead, and I was young, I was full of, vinegar, and I just plowed ahead as though nothing was around. And I had that's where I was a top Canadian. It was just weird. Whereas sometimes, when you've been in business for so long, you know too much.
Yeah, that's a really good point there, Paul. Really good.
So I think the moral of the story is that, if you get your headset right, because you can read the papers, you can listen to the news, you can get pretty damn depressed sometimes. Nobody's hiring, but I think again, even in the worst recessions, Lamborghini sales went up. People bought. Like my friend that owns this retail store, in the financial crisis, he sold more Boss suits than ever before. So it's you just got to know where to go.
That's right, and a lot of big fashion brands actually put their prices up during the recession.
Yes.
And they actually increased their sales as well. So there is this we're almost hypnotized into thinking that, there's a recession on, so there's something we can do about it. But a lot of it is a state of mind, and it's really about how you're going to react to what's going on rather than what's going on in of itself. So it's a really good point. Before you were working with Drew Coaching, Paul, how did you typically get business?
Boy, yeah. Relied on the old marketing way, I guess, on what we heard was open. I mean, when I look back, we used to follow up on ads, and how stupid was that when you think about it? The natural response from anybody when you're following up on an ad is, we've got to wait and see what their response is. Well, then you've lost 6 weeks right off the bat, right? So, but, I used to rely on existing clients to get my business, and to be honest with you, it used to work years ago. It really did. But then it started to drying up, and then we have a monthly newsletter. We did some good splits in those days with close friends in the business.
Yeah,
that was really it. It was that was the frustrating part, to be honest with you, Terry. I mean, it really was. It was. I used to talk to my colleagues that were doing well, and I kept on saying, what are you doing different than what I'm doing? And it didn't seem to be doing much different, but they were getting more business than I was. I just put it down to geography, which was probably wrong. But so, I guess you opened my eyes about how to market, and it has worked, and it's working. So.
And so, what sort of things do you do now that you weren't doing before?
Well, everything really. I mean, geez. As far as one thing I think that's been good is this social proof thing, because I used to talk to a client after the person's been on board about 6 months and say, I really like to get a testimonial. And sometimes those testimonials would take 6 months to a year to get back to me, because they didn't have time to sit down and sometimes they asked me to write it themselves. But a social proof, that's a little blurb that you put out was great. I mean, I could talk to somebody, ask them 4 or 5 questions in 5 minutes, and ask their approval to use it, and that's been great, because you send it out to a company that's very similar to them or a similar position to them, and they may even know the CEO or president, and that also helps. There's many things. I mean, I can go on. I mean, it's the 10 before 10. That's really been a struggle for me from a standpoint of finding time to do it effectively. Like if I would phone 10 people, I may get hold of 2, and then I would then when I roll it over to the next day. It takes time. I think when everybody works with what you suggest, with me anyway, I tried to do everything all at once, and I wasn't achieving anything. So we broke it all down. Luckily, I have a very good support person that's been with me 16 years, and we've started. I mean, we've been with you over a year now, and we really, it's taken a year to get really comfortable. And as far as when I say comfortable, knowing that everything's going to be automated, and working well. It just takes perhaps we're slow learners, but it took a while to get really going. I used to think 10 before 10, or see, I like the 3-step process, because I when everybody links in with me, I try to link in. I send out at least 10 or 20 a day, and I may get 10 back. And then after about a week, if I've got 30 or 40 connections, then I send them out a letter 1, and then 3 days later, a letter 2 with an option for an ebook. And those things have been good. Have the ebooks been successful? I don't know. It's hard to measure that, because as you quite rightly say, many people don't read them right off the bat, but it's making an introduction.
Yeah.
And those introductions, in this business can take a day, a week. It could take a year or 2 years sometimes to come to fruition, but it does happen, and you just got to keep it. I mean, there's nothing worse than phoning a client or a prospective client or somebody and they just said, well, it's been a year since I spoke to you, and I've hired somebody from XYZ company, and that really ticks you off. So I think with this methodology that we've got now, we're alleviating a lot of that now.
That's right.
We still get people that say we won't work with retainer. That's fine. I don't want to work with them either.
Yeah.
I mean, a year ago, I'd never think that way. I would grovel, and really, I mean, in the recession, I used to cut fee. It was awful. The more confident you are in your ability and to stand firm on, and again, it comes back to walk away. I never was willing to walk away before. Now I am. I've got respect, and I mean, the search that we got phoned in yesterday was a guy that I groveled with a year ago, and I think I offered him 25% first year's cash compensation, and he said, no, I'm going to go with the contingency fund. We came back to me yesterday and said, will you go down to 25%? I said no. Our fees are 30%. We're good at what we do. We're proven. We can help you solve your problem. Blah blah blah, and we picked it up. So.
Good for you, Paul. Well done. Well done. You mentioned the word respect quite frequently while I've been talking, and I remember something that my manager told me is that you don't win respect. You've always got it. You only can behave in such a way that you lose it. And when you're giving away your fees, all you're doing is you're just giving away part of your own self-respect. And you kind of touched on it there. It's a really good point. Paul, sorry, Paul.
No, so I think you have to earn your respect, and I think if you sell on price, you don't have any respect, and you become a commodity. And I'm not a commodity. Period.
Yeah.
If that comes up, then I walk away, and it's hard. I mean, I walked away this last year, 2015. I've walked away from probably 3 or 4 searches that I'd never have done before, but we were 61% up last year. So
good for you. Good for you, Paul. If you could change anything about the industry, what would it be?
Share anything about the industry?
Yeah, if you could change anything about the industry.
Oh, if I could change anything about the industry. Well, I think if anything, I'm trying to change it now. Is I think the view of search or recruiting is a negative as opposed to a positive. I think everybody seems to think that we just plunk a body in and get paid big bucks.
Yeah.
And I think that's really irks me because, I mean, hey, sometimes you do have a search where you feel like you're taking a candy from a baby, but other times it's the hardest dollar that you've ever earned in your life,
Yeah.
So I think if I had to change, it would be the perception of our industry. Yeah.
Perception of the industry, yeah. That's a fair point there, Paul. It's a fair point.
Because there are a lot of people, I think, in our industry that do it a disservice, to be honest with you.
Yeah, Paul, I'm not going to disagree with that, but I also think that they are the minority rather than majority. And I speak to a lot of search guys every day of the week, and I can honestly say that majority, 80, 90% are good, honest, straight guys. Yeah, there's some characters and people that you wouldn't cross the road to talk to, but overall, Paul, in my humble experience, most of the guys are good guys. And you're always going to get a few that are going to spoil it for everyone. But you're right about the perception. The perception, there's room for improvement in terms of the perception. But I think that's down to us in the industry to do something about that. But
I think it's a bit like being an estate agent, or insurance, because there are a lot of people get into it because they, they've either been unemployed or they want to try something on their own. And I think, when I'm talking about the people that have given the industry a bad reputation, they are the individuals, though, that don't stay in the industry that long. I mean,
yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah.
I think if you've been in industry, what I find, it's like a sales job. You can do wonders in this industry in 1 or 2 years. I mean, you really, really can. But to be in the industry a long time and be fairly successful at it, it is not easy to do. It's like when I worked at Gillette, I followed a guy that sold my territory before. He had all these G2 blades that he sold a wholesaler that would last 10 years. But he hit quota but he couldn't do anything the next few years. It's like this industry. You can go crazy, and then but you can make an instant impact. But it's longevity that's the key, I think, to be honest with you.
Yeah, good point. Good point. And what about books, Paul? What books have you read that you'd recommend to other owners and directors of search businesses?
Well, I'm just starting Leading by my wife bought with Alex Ferguson. I'm going to read that when I come over to the UK in a couple of weeks. But the two books three books I've read in the last year, I guess that really, one was Good to Great.
Yeah.
By Jim Collins, and that was bought me, by the way, by a girl that worked for me who graduated from business school when she was going through school. And then
just before we go on, Paul, could you just give an overview of the book Good to Great by Jim Collins?
It's by Jim Collins.
Yeah.
And then he followed up a book about a year or two later, which is another one I'm going to do actually to suggest with sending out to my clients, and that's Great by Choice.
Oh yeah.
Good to Great is taking a business that's good and making it great, but Great by Choice is taking a great business and making it even better in the turbulent times. It's really a good book.
Yeah.
And Snowball, which, to be honest with you, I'm down to the last few pages. Snowball is a huge book by Warren Buffett, and that is a great book to read. It's more about investments, but that's one of the books that's changed my whole vision of business, because he is second richest man in the world, right? So that's a good book as well. Yeah. So
that's about investing in that sort of thing, or is it about his life?
Well, Warren Buffett is a guy that likes. He doesn't invest in anything he doesn't understand. Like, for instance, Gillette is, he believes people have to shave, so he invests in Gillette. Visa, for instance, is a card that everybody will use. If you think about Visa, it's a company that has few employees. It's global. Everybody uses it, and it's doing well. So, I mean, he stays away from a lot of the high-tech stuff, right? I mean, Nike is another one that he likes, because you go around the world, everybody wears Nike stuff. So,
yeah.
So yeah, it's all about investments, but it's not just. I mean, it brings back the similarities in the search business about working with companies that are making money.
Yeah, good point.
And it really does.
The Snowball.
Yeah, Snowball, but it's a thick book. It's like about 500 pages, and I'm not a quick reader.
Right, I'll have to look out for that. I'll look out for that.
Sorry.
I said I'm going to look out for that. I haven't heard of it, but thanks for the recommendation.
Yeah.
Thanks for the explanation. Thanks for that. And Paul, what about you in terms of people listening to this? Where can people find out more about you?
Well, my LinkedIn profile, obviously, because it tells everybody about me there.
Okay. Could you spell your full name and the name of your business, please, Paul?
Yeah, it's Paul, P-A-U-L, and it's Verriez, it's V-E-R-R-I-E-Z, and it's pronounced Verriez, which is like Perrier, except that's got an R and I got a Z. The company's name is the Renegade Group, Inc., and we're in London, Ontario. We also have an office, a satellite office in Toronto, which we've had for about 20 years. My website is www.verriez.com.
Excellent, Paul. Thank you very much indeed. And can people connect with you on LinkedIn?
Yep.
Fantastic. Paul, that's been really so enjoyable. Thank you so much indeed.
Well, I've enjoyed it as well. It makes you think, right? You know. And,
yeah.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's it really makes you think about your own business and how you got here and what risks you took. And but you know, a lot of people, you know, have been in business as long as I have. They're looking to get out of it. But it's when you coming back to a question you asked me earlier, and I really didn't answer that effectively, I don't think, where, yeah, what do people need to do to be successful as a business? I tell you got to have passion for it. You know, if you don't have passion for it, you're not going to go. That's my belief anyway.
Yeah, I'd agree with that 100%.
You've got to really, I mean, do I enjoy coming to work every day? No, but 90% of the time I do. And but you've got to have passion. You know, if you don't really have the passion for it, it's like anything, right? If you have passion for football, you know, I mean, my wife doesn't understand how I get depressed when United lose.
And that's happening more and more frequently, isn't it?
Yeah, it's happening more and more all the time right now. Yeah, yeah, that's another story.
Yeah, that's all joking apart. That's a good point, you know. And again, my experience told me that your clients and your candidates, they can feel that passion, and it's contagious. That passion, enthusiasm is contagious as well.
Well, it is. It can be a detriment sometimes because I'm a pretty emotional guy and typical Taurus, I guess. But you know, if I get upset, you can tell me. You know, my wife says I can never lie because my top lip quivers. You've got to have passion.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul, thank you very, very much indeed.
You're welcome. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Paul. You take care, mate. See ya.
Thanks. Bye-bye.